What happens when the world of silk ties and marble floors collides with calloused hands and weary eyes? When power walks into the room expecting control, and instead finds chaos wrapped in vulnerability. In the heart of luxury, behind locked doors and polished perfection, a mistake is made. A line is crossed. He was never supposed to meet her. She was never meant to be seen. Yet there she is, asleep where she shouldn't be, unaware that everything is about to change. One scream. One spill. One spark. Fate doesn't ask permission. It just strikes. Stay here. Their story begins with a misunderstanding and ends with a choice that could shatter everything. Luxury wasn't a dream for Ivy Quinn, it was her reality, just not in the way people imagined. While others sipped champagne in silk gowns under chandeliers, Ivy scrubbed marble floors and folded Egyptian cotton sheets. She worked 2 shifts at the opulent Regent Crown Hotel, juggling exhaustion and ambition with the same set of calloused hands. She didn't complain. She didn't have time to. Tonight was no different, except it was. Her double shift had turned into a triple thanks to a no-show co-worker, and Ivy had barely caught her breath before being sent to clean Penthouse, Suite 57, the VIP of VIP rooms. The last thing she remembered was setting down the cleaning supplies in the private bathroom. And thinking she'd just rest her eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Knox Wilder hated delays. Hated surprises even more. The jet lag hadn't worn off from Tokyo, and his inbox was already a war zone of contracts, negotiations, and demands. As the CEO of Wilder Global, he was used to pressure. Thrived in it. Controlled it. But tonight, all he wanted was silence, a hot shower, a drink, and no interruptions. He pushed open the door to his private suite, tossing his jacket over the velvet armchair, unbuttoning his cufflinks as he made his way toward the bathroom. And froze. There, slumped awkwardly against the tiled wall, was a woman. Wearing a staff uniform. Eyes closed. Asleep. Or worse. What the hell? Knox lunged forward, panic hitting him like a freight train. Hey. Who the hell are you? Are you okay? The woman jerked awake, eyes wide with terror. What, oh my God? In her panic, Ivy scrambled to her feet and knocked over the bucket of dirty mop water. It splashed across the marble and all over Knox Wilder's $1,000 suit. For a beat, the room went silent. Then, are you serious? Knox roared, looking down at his soaked shirt, disgusted and furious. Ivy stood frozen, hair sticking to her forehead, heart thudding like a drum. I didn't mean to, she stammered, eyes darting to the bucket, to his suit, to his very angry face. You broke into my suite, fell asleep in my bathroom, and now I'm soaked in filth. I didn't break in. I work here, she blurted, holding up her ID badge like a shield. Knox snatched it from her hand, eyes narrowing. Ivy Quinn, housekeeping. He looked her up and down, drenched, panicked, exhausted. Well, Ivy Quinn, he snapped, congratulations. You've just made the worst first impression of your life. And just like that, everything Ivy thought she knew about rock bottom plunged deeper. Water still dripped from Knox's custom-tailored shirt, pooling around his Italian leather shoes. His jaw was tight, his temper sharper than the razor-edged cufflinks he'd tossed aside. You're fired. The words came out like ice. Ivy's breath caught. Please, wait. It was an accident. I didn't know this room was occupied. I was told. Told to nap on the job. Knox snapped, tossing her ID on the counter like it was contagious. Do you have any idea how many liability lawsuits this could trigger? You could have been an intruder, a thief, or worse. Ivy's eyes burned, but she stood her ground. "I'm not a thief. I'm just exhausted." Her voice faltered. "I've worked 3 shifts in 2 days. I didn't even know I fell asleep." Knox ran a hand through his damp hair, pacing. His instincts told him to end this now, cut the risk, remove the problem. But something in her voice pulled at him, raw, real. Unfiltered in a way most people around him never dared to be. Still, he wasn't known for second chances. "You're lucky I'm not calling security," he muttered. As he reached for his phone, Ivy's nose twitched, and she frowned. "Is that mildew?" Knox blinked, distracted. "What?" Ivy moved toward the closet, sniffing. "There's moisture buildup somewhere near the vents. I smell mold, probably from a leak in the ceiling insulation." She glanced back. "Also, the candles. They are supposed to be sandalwood and citrus, right? Someone used vanilla musk instead. It clashes with the scent branding of your hotel." Knox stared at her, stunned. "How do you know that?" "I work here. I care." And for what it's worth, the minibars stopped incorrectly. Room 57 should have the reserve champagne, not the standard. Plus, your bedsheets are folded wrong. Top edge facing out, not in. A beat of silence. Knox lowered his phone, brow furrowed in confusion and curiosity. "You picked all that up in what? 5 minutes?" "More like 3, Ivy said softly, realizing her words had shifted the energy in the room. "Look, fire me if you want. But don't pretend your hotel is perfect." Knox crossed his arms, studying her. She wasn't just some overworked maid. She had instincts, the kind of attention to detail his management team lacked. He didn't like being impressed. But he was. "Maybe you're not useless after all," he muttered. Ivy blinked. "Excuse me," I said. "Maybe there's a use for someone who notices things no one else does." He paced again, thoughts racing. "I'm conducting a full audit of this property in the next quarter. I could use eyes. Honest ones." Ivy's heart pounded. "Are you offering me a job?" Knox smirked. "Call it a trial. Starting now. You're going to be my undercover quality inspector. Report to me directly. Screw it up, and you're gone for good." Ivy opened her mouth, then closed it. From almost being fired to working directly under Knox Wilder. Yeah, her life had just taken the sharpest, strangest turn imaginable. At first, Ivy thought it was her imagination. The cold glances. The sudden silences when she walked into the staff lounge. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence, smiles too tight, eyes too calculating. But it wasn't in her head. Ever since her promotion, the air inside Regent Crown Hotel had shifted. Ivy wasn't just housekeeping anymore. She was the girl Knox Wilder spoke to, the one who walked the halls with a clipboard in his ear. And nothing bred resentment faster than proximity to power. "Enjoy it while it lasts," someone muttered as she walked past. "Probably slept her way to it," another voice sneered behind her back. Ivy kept her head down, lips pressed tight. She didn't rise to it. Couldn't afford to. Not when she was finally getting a chance to do something real. But it was harder than she'd ever imagined. And at the center of it all, Rebecca Hayes. Tall, impeccably dressed, manager of the hotel, and Knox's former flame. Rebecca didn't just dislike Ivy, she loathed her. At first, it was subtle. An accidental schedule change that left Ivy double-booked. Missing supplies. Emails mysteriously never received. Then came the rumors. Whispers that Ivy was Knox's pet project. That she was climbing the ranks the easy way. That she was nothing more than a distraction. And Ivy tried to ignore it, until the day security pulled her aside. "We found this in your locker. A gold bracelet. One of the VIP guests' missing items, something Ivy had never seen before." Her mouth went dry. "That's not mine. I didn't take anything." "We have footage of you entering the suite," security said coldly. "And the bracelet was reported missing the same night." Her heart pounded. This was insane. It didn't make sense. She was being set up. But no one cared. Not until he walked in. Knox's voice cut through the room like steel. "Enough. Let her go." Security turned, startled. "Mr. Wilder, sir, we have evidence." "Evidence of what?" Knox's gaze was deadly calm. "A convenient discovery in an unlocked locker. No chain of custody, no proper procedure. I'll handle this personally." His eyes locked onto Ivy's. "You're coming with me." Back in his office, Ivy sat stiffly, hands shaking. "I didn't steal anything, Knox. You have to believe me." "I do," he said quietly. "This wasn't about the bracelet. This was about you." "A beat. Rebecca." His voice turned dark. "She's trying to force you out." Ivy blinked, stunned. "But why?" Knox sighed, tension radiating off him. "Because I noticed you. And Rebecca can't stand not being in control." Before Ivy could respond, a knock interrupted them. An assistant entered, holding a tablet. "Mr. Wilder, the board's calling for an emergency meeting. They've seen the footage and the rumors are spreading. They're questioning your judgment, accusing you of protecting staff with personal ties." Ivy's heart dropped. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was his reputation. His company. His empire. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to drag you into this." Knox looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, there was no mask, no arrogance. Only conviction. "You didn't drag me anywhere, Ivy. I chose to be here." And with that, he walked into the fire, to defend her. Even if it cost him everything. Ivy had packed her things. After the accusation, the stares, the boardroom whispers about Knox's poor judgment, it was all too much. She couldn't breathe under the weight of doubt, the feeling that no matter what she did, she didn't belong. So she wrote her resignation. Folded it neatly. Left it on her nightstand. But Knox got to her before she could walk away. "Come with me." That's all he said. No explanations. No pressure. Just an open passenger door and a gaze that said, "Trust me." Ivy hesitated, heart pounding. Then got in. The lodge was 2 hours outside the city. Quiet, rustic, tucked between pines and silence. No staff. No board members. Just a battered kitchen, a fireplace, and the first stars Ivy had seen in weeks. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "You didn't have to do this," she murmured. Knox stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "You were going to quit. You were about to lose your company. It's just a company." His voice was low. "You're more important." They cooked dinner together, sort of. Ivy chopped vegetables like a pro, Knox burned the first pan of garlic, cursed, and insisted it was tactical caramelization. She laughed for the first time in days. Afterward, Knox found an old clock in the corner, dusty, broken. "It hasn't worked in years," he muttered, peering inside. "Then let's fix it," Ivy said. They spent hours at the kitchen table, gears and tiny screws scattered between them. No deadlines. No suits. Just time, being reclaimed. Later that night, Ivy sat by the fire, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. A soft melody played from the vintage radio, a haunting piano piece that drifted through the room like memory itself. Her breath hitched. Eyes welled. That song, she whispered, voice shaking. My mom used to play it when I was little. Right before she died. Knox watched as tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and raw. He didn't speak, just knelt beside her, offering his hand. She took it. You always seem so untouchable, Ivy murmured later, eyes meeting his in the firelight. Knox leaned back, staring into the flames. I had to be. After my mom passed, it was just me and my father. No softness. No room for mistakes. I learned fast, emotions don't survive in boardrooms. A beat of silence. Sometimes, I wonder if I even have a heart left. Ivy reached for the clock they'd repaired, now ticking softly. You do. You just forgot how it sounds. That night, a storm cut the power. The cabin bathed in candlelight, flickering gold against the walls. When you were a kid, what did you want? Ivy asked. Knox thought for a moment. A place where I could be. Just me. Not Wilder Global. Not the air. Just Knox. She smiled. I wanted a little diner. A place with pies and coffee and people who stayed to talk, not just to eat. They sat in the quiet, two people from different worlds, finding belonging in the same dream. As the candle burned low, Ivy turned to him. Thank you. For believing me. No one's ever done that before. Knox looked at her, eyes soft for the first time. You didn't just fix that clock tonight, Ivy. You fixed something in me I thought was broken for good. And for once, the billionaire who had everything felt whole. When Knox first mentioned Paris, Ivy laughed. You're joking, right? Paris? Me? But he wasn't joking. I need a second opinion on a potential investment, a chain of fine dining restaurants. And I trust your taste. He'd said it casually, like inviting her to lunch, not whisking her halfway across the world. Ivy hesitated. Then she said yes. The jet was nothing like Coach. Plush leather seats, endless champagne, though Knox, she noticed, didn't touch his glass. Her seat was right beside his. Ivy shifted awkwardly, fidgeting with the silk blanket. You don't have to be nervous, Knox said, glancing at her. I'm not, she lied, then blinked in surprise as a flight attendant approached with a tray. Your jasmine tea, Miss Quinn. As requested. Ivy stared at the cup, then at Knox. He shrugged, a rare smile tugging at his lips. You mentioned it once. I remember things. Her heart fluttered in her chest, a small gesture, but one that meant everything. Paris was dizzying. Marble floors, chandeliers, menus with no prices. Ivy felt like she'd stepped into a movie. But she didn't pretend to belong. And that's what Knox admired. While executives and chefs fawned over him, Ivy stayed grounded, honest, observant, herself. At every restaurant, Knox deferred to her. Ivy. What's your take? He asked, even in front of Michelin-starred chefs. She offered critiques with care but confidence. Knox listened, really listened, nodding, validating her thoughts with more respect than anyone had ever shown her. And the way his gaze lingered on her. It wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. One evening, Ivy wandered through a bustling night market, captivated by lights, scents, and the hum of French chatter. Until she realized she'd gone too far. Her phone was dead. The streets blurred. Panic set in. Knox is going to kill me, she muttered, spinning in circles. And then, Ivy. She turned just as Knox came sprinting through the crowd, eyes wide with fear. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it stole her breath. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered against her hair, voice rough. "I thought I lost you." Her heart pounded. He didn't let go for a long time. Later that night, on the balcony of their hotel, they stood side by side, the Eiffel Tower glowing in the distance. Silence stretched between them, charged, fragile. Ivy turned to him. "I don't get it. Why me? You could have anyone." Knox met her gaze, eyes darker than the Paris sky. "You don't see yourself the way I do." He leaned in, just inches away. Her breath caught. And then, his phone rang. He cursed under his breath, stepping away, the moment shattered. Ivy stood there, heart racing, confused. This wasn't just attraction anymore. She felt it, deep, dangerous, real. But a voice inside whispered, "Don't fall. You're just a temporary distraction to a man used to getting what he wants." And as she tried to quiet that voice, somewhere in the shadows, a camera shutter clicked. Rebecca Hayes, smiling coldly, watched the screen light up with a stolen photo, Ivy and Knox, close enough to ruin everything. Knox wasn't just investing in Ivy's instincts, he wanted the world to see what she could do. At a private tasting event hosted by Maison Laurent, Paris's most exclusive culinary group, Knox introduced Ivy to the legendary chef Auguste, a man whose approval could make or break culinary careers. "She has a palate like no one I've ever met," Knox said, pride evident in his voice. "I trust her judgment more than any critic." Ivy blushed but nodded, accepting a sample dish. One taste. That's all it took. "The truffle's too dominant. You're masking the saffron instead of enhancing it," she said softly. Chef Auguste blinked, then laughed in delight. "Mon Dieu, she's right." Knox watched her, something like awe in his eyes. She wasn't just surviving in this world, she was born for it. Enter Nicolas Laurent. Charming, eloquent, with eyes like steel wrapped in velvet. The founder of Maison Laurent, a titan in global gastronomy, and a silent rival of Knox Wilder. He approached Ivy with effortless grace. "Your gift is rare, Miss Quinn," Nicolas said, handing her a glass of wine. "People like you don't belong in the shadows of someone else's empire. You should build your own." Ivy hesitated. "You're wasted in hospitality. Come work for me, creative lead for my new venture. Name your salary. I'll double it if you walk away from Knox today." Her breath caught. 10 times her current pay. Her own platform. Recognition. Nicolas leaned in, voice smooth. "Knox sees you as a tool. A convenient mouth to help his investments. I see you, the woman, the talent, the future." Doubt crept in. Was Knox empowering her, or simply using her? And then came the photo. Delivered in a crisp envelope slipped under her hotel door. A printed email thread, allegedly from Knox's office. "Use Ivy's input to leverage pricing in Paris. Ensure she stays under our umbrella until the Laurent deal closes." Ivy's hands shook. Next, a tabloid headline, "Knox Wilder's secret strategy, romance and revenue." Her face. His face. The balcony. The moment. It all looked so calculated. Ivy's heart shattered. Had it all been a game? Was she just another pawn in a billionaire's boardroom? No confrontation. No explanation. She packed her bag in silence. Left a note on the pillow, "Thank you for everything. I need to find out who I am without you." Before dawn, Ivy disappeared into the Paris mist. And Knox woke up to an empty room, and a woman he never wanted to lose, already gone. Knox wasn't used to silence. His world was built on control, boardrooms, contracts, strategy. But now, the silence in that hotel suite was deafening. Her note lay crumpled in his hand, over and over, like it could somehow erase itself. He didn't believe in coincidences. And something about that email, the timing, the tone, felt wrong. Very wrong. By noon, his legal team had traced the email's metadata. Forged, the analyst confirmed. Sent from a dummy account. Not your system. Knox's eyes narrowed. Rebecca. The confrontation was fast, brutal. He stormed into her office, slamming the printed email onto her desk. Care to explain this? Rebecca didn't flinch. She was distracting you. Weakening you. I did what I had to. You lied. You set her up. And now. You're done. He didn't wait for protests. By the end of the hour, Rebecca's access was revoked. An internal memo went out, termination due to misconduct. But that wasn't enough. Knox flew straight to Nicolas Laurent's flagship restaurant. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed, he didn't care. Live, in front of the press, he exposed everything. Nicolas Laurent conspired to sabotage my investment using false documentation and manipulated media. Let this be a warning, you don't build empires on lies. By the time the headlines hit, Ivy was already back in New York, alone. She saw the press conference on TV, read the statements, even heard the recording of Knox publicly walking away from the Paris deal. No investment is worth losing someone who actually matters. Her breath caught. But her heart, it still hurt. The betrayal, the doubt, the feeling of being used, it didn't vanish overnight. That evening, a knock echoed through her apartment. Ivy opened the door to find no one, just a box. Inside, a small, familiar clock, the one they fixed together in that quiet lodge. Taped to it was a note in Knox's handwriting. Time doesn't heal everything. But I'm willing to wait, if it means I get to earn your trust back, Kay. She closed her eyes, clutching the clock to her chest. Part of her wanted to run to him. Part of her still needed time. Ivy couldn't sleep. Not because of Knox, not entirely. The headlines, the gesture, the clock, they haunted her, yes. But something else kept her awake, Nicolas Laurent's contract. The terms had seemed too good to be true. Now, with distance and clarity, Ivy saw the cracks. Why was he so desperate to lock her in? Why had he dangled freedom that easily? The memories clicked into place, ingredients that didn't match menus, vendors that changed last minute, dishes she sampled that didn't taste quite right. No chef of that caliber made those kinds of mistakes. Her gut screamed fraud. And Ivy had learned to trust her instincts. She booked the flight herself. No calls. No warnings. Just action. Back in Paris, she moved quietly, slipping through the market where it all began. She posed as a customer, a critic, even a supplier, asking questions, observing patterns. The deeper she dug, the darker it got. Maison Laurent was substituting low-grade ingredients in high-end dishes, profiting from deception on a global scale. And her contract. It was a trap. Signing it would have made her complicit in a scandal that could destroy her. She took photos. Recorded conversations. Proof. But someone noticed. You should have stayed in New York. Nicolas stood in the dim hallway behind the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes cold. You don't know who you're playing with, Ivy. Her voice didn't waver. I know exactly who you are now. And I'm done playing. He stepped closer, menace in every breath. You won't leave with that evidence. I promise you that. A hand shot out, grabbing her wrist tight. Then, a crash. Let her go. Knox. He didn't wait for permission. In seconds, Knox was between them, slamming Nicholas against the wall. His voice was low, deadly. You touch her again, and I'll end you. This time, legally. Security burst in moments later, alerted by Ivy's silent distress signal. Hours later, safe in Knox's hotel suite, Ivy stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. You didn't have to come, she whispered. Knox stepped behind her, voice softer now. You didn't wait for me to save you. You saved yourself. A pause. But I'd fly to the ends of the earth for you, Ivy. Always. She turned, eyes searching his face. Why? After everything. Knox's voice broke. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as part of my world, and realized you are my world. No more pretense. No more games. She stepped into his arms, tears slipping down her cheeks. I was so scared, she whispered. So was I, he murmured, pulling her closer. And in that embrace, truth shattered fear. Finally, they were free to feel everything. Paris was behind them now. Scandals faded. Contracts were torn. And with them, the last chains that held Ivy back. On the terrace of Knox's New York penthouse, the city stretched wide beneath a violet dusk. The wind carried hints of autumn, and in that stillness, he stood before her, not as a billionaire, not as the man who once controlled boardrooms with a glare, but as Knox, stripped of armor. Ivy. She turned, heart steady. I don't want to keep you in my world if it means you lose yours. If you walk away today, I'll support you, quietly, from afar. He took a breath. But if you stay, stay because it's your choice, not because you feel obligated. I love you. No deals, no contracts. Just you. Silence stretched between them. Then Ivy smiled. I love you, too. She stepped closer, slipping her hand into his. But I won't be your shadow, Knox. I want to build something real, a place that's mine, where people come for comfort, not just luxury. A little restaurant. A little life. He exhaled, eyes warm. Then let's make that life, together. And your restaurant. I'll be your first customer. Every night. 1 year later. The sign above the door read, Quinn Company. Warm lights. Rustic tables. Laughter spilling out into the street. Inside, Ivy moved between guests, smiling, confident, whole. Critics called her a culinary whisperer, a rising star in the food world. But to her patrons, she was simply Ivy, the soul behind the flavors they couldn't forget. In the corner, Knox sat at his usual table, no tie, no mask, only a book in hand and peace in his eyes. Gone was the ice in his veins. Gone was the need to conquer. All that remained was her, and the life they'd chosen, not inherited. As the music played low and laughter filled the air, Ivy looked at Knox, their eyes meeting across the room. He raised his glass. She smiled back. No titles. No games. Just love, and a new beginning. This isn't just a love story. It's about a girl who refused to be small in a world that told her to stay in her place. A man who let go of control to find something real. And the truth that no matter where you come from, your voice matters. Dream without limits. Your background doesn't define your future. The only ceilings that exist are the ones you refuse to break through. Real love is partnership, not possession. It's not about being saved, it's about standing side by side, lifting each other higher, with respect and trust as the foundation. Don't let society decide your worth. Your instincts, your talent, your fire, no system, no status quo, no person has the right to diminish them. Struggles build strength. Every hardship is a brick in the road to success. Without pressure, diamonds don't form. Money doesn't measure character. Kindness, courage, and integrity, these are the true currencies of a life well lived. Fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Justice isn't given. It's claimed by those brave enough to stand up, speak out, and risk it all for truth. This story is a reminder. Your dreams are valid. Your voice is powerful. And your heart, when fearless, can change everything.